Um, so hello, I will say welcome to the Moodle Developer Meet. But just to say welcome and hello, and then I'm going to hand over to our new Community Developer Liaison, is the official title, but we'll know him as David Mudrack, and he's a new person responsible, well, he's not a new person, but he's newly responsible for running these meetings as well as a bunch of other activities, and basically being in between Moodle HQ and community developers and thinking of new ways to improve that relationship and other things, as well as the plugins, which he obviously has been doing for some time. So I'm going to hand over to David to run the rest of the meeting. So over to you, David.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome. Firstly, welcome to this event, our October developer meeting. We have quite a long agenda list, so I don't think there is necessary to waste some time. And let's start with a guy called Martin de Guillemas, who would nicely introduce us new Moodle 2.8, which is coming soon in 3 weeks. And Martin, can I ask you to shortly introduce what can we look forward in this new release?
Cool. Yes. Well, that's a bit funny handing backwards and forwards, but I'm just going to go through a few highlights. Obviously, I hope you've probably seen the release notes that are still under construction, and there's a lot of things, so if anybody here, feel free to jump in at any time. But I'm just going to rush through quickly some highlights, and also along the way answer a couple of the questions that were on the developer meeting page. So I think there's a few places to talk right now. There's the dev chat and hash Moodle dev as well. First thing I want to point out is that our versions are going to do the nice thing and go to Moodle 3 after 2.9. Moodle 3 will not be a particularly special release, as far as you know, but it will have, it's just a nice number to go to after 2.9, so it's going to happen on schedule like that. As you know, 2.7 is a long-term support release. That'll end at the same time as Moodle 3 if it's a normal release. I'm guessing one of these releases will also be a long-term support release, 3.0 or 3.1. So we'll see as we get closer when the next one will be. But that's kind of the thinking at the moment. We're still working on the major areas on the roadmap, which are these, and we made some good steps towards some of that stuff in 2.8, and there's a lot more planned for later. The big thing in 2.8 is gradebook improvements, as in the most massive thing. It's very complex. Everyone hates working on the gradebook. It's very difficult code. It's very full of little tiny exceptions and bits of code. So by preference, I think everyone likes to avoid it, but we just had to kind of bite the bullet and get into some of this stuff. And what was a really good help, and it's the first time we've done this, is that we had a workshop first. This was at Long Beach, California, with about 20 users that gave us a rough roadmap of what they wanted. We also had surveys, and we looked at all the tracker issues as well. Most of it is all about improving the usability of the current features rather than adding new stuff. But there are some new features as well. This model of getting users to write the spec is something you'll be talking more about in a minute. So the gradebook improvements are mostly these. We've got the grader report, we've got natural weighting as two big things, but there's so many other little pieces. I haven't got any nice videos or demos today because it's not that sort of a meeting, but they're all being busily produced by our sites team and by the marketing team, so there'll be a lot of that coming out soon. But just a couple of screenshots. The this is how the new grader report looks. As you scroll down, it fills up the whole window and has smooth, stable scrolling in all directions, and works on all platforms. And as you can imagine, there's so much work to make that look so simple. It's the usual thing. When you're setting up grades as well, it's got a new layout and also has a lot of new features for aggregating and setting weights. And in fact, in most cases, I imagine almost everybody will not have to use multiple types of aggregations anymore. So that removes that aggravation. And it's just overall a lot simpler. Something else, that's all I'm going to say about, unless my slides are out of order, as I think they might be. There's overall navigation improvements. There's a bunch of stuff that's been sitting on the plate for most of this year. And a bunch of the guys at HQ here, including Fred, including who else was working on it in the beginning? Jason? Jetta. So they've come up with a long list of navigation improvements that we haven't been able to get into all of them, but definitely 2.9. That's one of the things that will happen in 2.9 to finish them off. And they kind of all hang together, and they're all a set because they're all about reducing the navigation block to almost nothing. But the first one is the user menu, which was relatively standalone. And there's now a user menu in the clean theme that looks a bit like this. Implements what most themers tend to add anyway. And it has a few things by default. It'll look better and be more complete when the other parts of navigation stuff lands in 2.9. But at the moment it's very simple, and there is a sort of a hacky admin setting where you can, as the admin, stick in new items in here just to make it more useful in the short term. There's improvements to the quiz. Tim's here. I guess you're talking about it. I didn't look too closely. Are you talking about it, Tim? I hope so.
No,
anyway.
I'm talking about the next crazy idea.
Great. Well, I'll talk about that. But I'll just mention
This has been out there for
the new quiz interface, which I think looks way better and is pretty cool. There's a bunch of forum improvements. I know Andrew is talking about some of that, but shortly. But again, there's a list of things that are designed as a package, and we've been working our way through them. The ones that are 2.8 are discussion subscriptions, replying by email, which is very cool, and there's some usability stuff as well, navigation. The inbound message API is what makes the mailing work. Andrew's going to talk about that later, so I'm not going to get into it now. Quite a lot of work has been happening on mobile, and Juan will talk about that too. Some of it is replicating things that are in Moodle now, but some of it he has been extending Moodle with new web services to provide that functionality. So there's quite good additions to Moodle that have come along with that as well. And we've been adding more logging events to the ones that all landed in 2.7 and 4. I'll address these events in a minute, but one of the features that uses the new events is a bit of a sample analytics tool that looks for active event data. Ankit and a bunch of other guys have been working on this. This tool looks for patterns of activity in the events logs and in the events live as they're happening, and then creates a new event when that pattern is seen, and it can send out a notification that that thing has happened. So you can set up something that says, look for anytime there's more than 20 posts within an hour in a forum, and let me know about it. So this is just the start of, and the reason, one of the questions was about the logs and why are they so hard, and I think we feel the pain, but the reason for it was that Moodle is going in the direction of analytics and about computer-aided teaching and computer-aided learning. So to do that, we need to have code looking for patterns in live data and sending people feedback. Feedback, and I've got a blog post somewhere coming out soon about this, but feedback is the if you like, the universal law of education underneath all these techniques on the screen. Giving people feedback at all times is really essential, and it applies not only to education at an institution, but at work and in life and so on. You're basically growing in response to feedback from other people, from the environment, and from your own reflection. So good educational feedback has to be really goal-based, has to have an external view of the learner, has to give you an external view of yourself as a learner. It has to be timely. This is critical. It has to happen at the moment that you've just tried to do something. It can't be 6 months later. It's going to be useless. It has to be something actionable. It has to be consistent, and so on. These are things that come out of research and feedback. So, as you know, we have a research community, and we're trying to stimulate that. Michael Durat, who was the development manager, is still the development manager here, and is probably talking later. Will be moving to a new position in Moodle HQ as a research manager, and he's going to be pushing this research agenda and stimulating and collecting research to do with Moodle and improving online education. And the other thing we're doing is we're taking over some of the moots. We'll be running the Australian moot next year. There is a US moot planned for later in the year. To an extent, the UK moot will also be doing some of this stuff. But what we're doing is a number of things. We're simplifying some of the moot structure, and we're going to be having professional video recordings. So we'll be aiming to build up an online library of presentations. With really good quality. The key thing I wanted to mention is that we'll be having hackfests for users, basically. So facilitated brainstorming sessions, asking users to design the next Moodle, and they'll be looking at very specific areas each time. And the Australians will look at one thing, the French can look at something else, the UK can look at something else. And the purpose of those sessions is at the end to come up with a specification, much like the gradebook workshop did, that we can pump into the development process at HQ and use to develop the next things. So as we do this more often, we'll get better at it. But I really think this direct user-developer connection is what we've been missing. The tracker is a bit too scattershot. You know, I know some of you guys out there are developing for your own local communities, and you have your own community user feedback, which is great. That's really good. But we here don't do that directly ourselves, and I think we should as well. So the Australian one will be the first real big one we run ourselves. That's in July next year in Melbourne. Anybody's welcome to come to it from around the world. And there's the URL. All these Moodle moots are going to be on moodlemoot.org from now on as well. So that's it from me, and I will get off and let someone else have a turn. So thanks. I'm going to check all the chat and questions now, and I'll respond there. I haven't seen anything yet. I haven't got it on the screen, that's why. All right. Over to you, David.
I'm having a bit of troubles with local Windows yet, but let's hope everything will manage soon. Okay, next on the agenda, or maybe we can wait 30 seconds or so, which is reported lag we have right now between the live session and the YouTube channel, to see if some questions arrive into Jabber Chat or so to give it time. And I would like to ask Andrew to prepare to taxi to runway.
Do I just get that started now?
Okay. if there is no question, we can maybe return to this Moodle 2.8 release again, and I guess we can talk about events a bit, maybe. So let's move on to inbound message API, which is a new API introducing in 2.8, and I would like to ask Andrew Nichols, the author of this feature, to introduce it a bit. Andrew, please.
Cool. Right, I hope everyone can see my screen. I'm sure soon here for you can't. So I'm going to be talking about the inbound message API. I've started writing some of the developer documentation for that, and the link is at the bottom there. I'll also paste it in the chat in a minute, and it'll be on my final slide as well. The inbound messaging API is made up of a number of components. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of how the whole thing works, essentially, and then explain how it affects developers. So this is all for developers, it's not really a presentation or information for users. So the main components are an address generator, which essentially encodes a number of pieces of metadata into an address which Moodle can receive emails to, and then it stores some of that data in the database. There's a mail pickup side of things. We have an IMAP server which processes and validates the incoming messages, and it also fetches attachments and handles most of the common problems that we see, and I'll talk about some of those shortly. And then there's the message handlers, and those define the level of validation which happens, the default validity of each email address, and how then a message is actually handled. And a handler is made up of two main components. First, you've got the DB message inbound handlers.php, and that's very similar to the DB access, and where we define capabilities, where we define tasks for scheduled tasks, databases, all of that kind of stuff. That's very similar. And then we've got the actual class which defines how things are handled. So here's an example of the message inbound handler. This is the one from the forum, and I've just added some of the fields which we don't use in there by default. I'll just check if everyone can actually see me or not. Apparently it's just flipped to David. Can you control that, David?
Sorry.
Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry, it's just a report and never mind. Anyway, so in there you just say you put in the class name. We're using the auto-loading API. So by putting the files into the relevant part of your module. So in the example of, I've got a fictitious module here called modfruit, and within the classes message inbound folders, you have the smoothie handler, and that would be called in this class name modsmoothie /message /inbound /smoothie _handler. You can also specify the default address validity, whether the handle is enabled when the handler isn't installed, and whether we actually validate the addresses. And I'll just talk quickly about that validation. The way that all of this works is that for every time you want to generate an address that people can reply to, we generate an address which has a number of unique pieces of information in. The first item is the ID of the handler, and so every time we create a new handler, we insert it into the database. And that has an ID, so we encode the ID of that handler, and that can then be mapped back to this class. We also have a validation period. So when you, for example, send a new forum email, that has a default validity. So if you try and reply to that forum email after a certain period of time, that email address will no longer work, and you'll get an email back saying that the address that you're using has been expired, you can't use it anymore. You can also then do some address validation. So for Moodle, for every user in Moodle, we have an email address for that user. And if the forum reply doesn't come from that user, this can be set such that it will only accept messages from that user. And if it doesn't, it can be optionally configured to send out an email which the user can then reply to. And that will be sent to the Moodle user. So if somebody has somehow got hold of that email address and is trying to send email in, then they'd have to know a bit more information, or they'd have to have control over the user's email account, and several of these settings are configurable by the admin. So all of these three settings: the default expiration period, whether the handler is actually currently enabled, not obviously enabled to install, and whether we validate the email address. They're all configured through the admin tool, which we put into the core. So then we have the example of a smoothie handler. So in my fictitious example, we have a module in Moodle where you can create a drink, and it sends you an email asking you what the drink is, and perhaps to include some pictures, and you can do so. So this is a very, very basic handler. It's a smoothie handler. It extends the core message API's inbound handler, which is where it gets most of its magic from, and it's in the namespace modfruit message inbound. It has three main functions which you have to define. So you have get description, which typically, I haven't put it in this example, but typically returns the get string for a description, so that can be translated, and that's shown in the admin interface. Same goes for a name, and again that's shown in the admin interface. And then you actually have the message processing, and that takes it's passed some basic information, which I'll show you in a moment. So in this example, we have a handler. This handler has been given the ID of 3 when it's been inserted into the database. And for every single piece of information, for every address that you generate for that handler, you have to include a piece of data, and that's an integer which we store in the database. So, of course, as a tribute to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, we have 42, the meaning of life, the universe, and everything, because that is, of course, the best string to have. So when we create a new handler, we can call set data, we specify the ID, and if you, in the example of the forum, every time we send a reply handler email, we use the post ID, and then we can look up that post in the database. And when we generate those, we then, when we specify that in the database, the handler system generates a new data key, which is here, and that's just an MD5 essentially, and we just use bits of that. And all of these three pieces of information, along with the address validity for this address, and that can be set on a per handler basis or on a per module basis, depending on how, as a developer, you want to configure things. All of that's stored in the database. On top of that, we then use the user ID to generate an email address, and this is just an example one. We have the email address, which is your general mailbox, and then using an email system called subaddressing, we put everything, all the other data, after this plus. So from that plus to the @ sign, we have a number of characters we can use to store the data, and we do that by basic 64 encoding and then binary packing that data. And so in that address, it's not actually using this particular piece of data, but we have the data ID, data key, as well as the handler ID and the user ID. So for every single email that we send, we can have 3 unique pieces of information which relate to something in Moodle. So we have the data value, which relates to the drink that we're making, the handler ID, which actually says this is belonging to modfruit, and it's a smoothie handler, and then you have the user ID that's replying, and that way we can load up that user, make sure that the user ID is valid for that user, and all that kind of thing. And then we use that as the reply to address, and the reason that we do that is that it's not obviously presented by most mail clients. If you look at the Google one, this is another email address I've been testing with. This email has come from my admin user to myself, but it's got the reply to address. And for most mail clients, when you click on the reply button in the mail client, it will use that address rather than the from address. And there's also a sender address, but we won't go into that. And that's just a feature of email and email clients. So that's essentially how the forum one works. But the private messaging, the private files implementation that we've done just displays the email address, so a user can email it directly. So I'll just quickly have a look, see if there's any questions so far. So Eric Mayer was asked if we screen out inbound handler on vacation type auto replies. Generally, when we send emails from Moodle, we send them with a message type of bulk, and any well-behaving MTA or server should actually not reply with vacation replies for those, and so we shouldn't get into any auto replies. And most MTAs are well-behaving, including Exchange, Tim Hunt. Anyway, I'll continue on. So this is just a quick example of how we can use that. So this top section here is just the standard data that you'll already have if you're sending any emails in Moodle or sending any events. On top of that, we're then adding the address generation. And the way we're doing that is to create a new address manager, which is the core system for doing that. We tell the handler which, we tell the generator which handler we're using. We then specify our piece of ID, and then we generate the address using the user ID. So it's the three pieces of information: just the handler, which we load within the address manager, the data which the handler knows about, and then the user. And again, those are the three pieces of information that we have, which specify, will give us the ability to have this unique address. And then when we come to actually processing the inbound address, we take those three pieces of information, we throw away the @ sign and the plus, and we validate that it's been sent to the right address and the right domain, obviously, and then we throw those away as well. And then we take those and we can decode those because we know how they've been encoded to get the handler ID, to get the data value and the data key, and we check though all of that is valid. And if it's not, then we send the user an email to say that something's wrong. If the data key has been expired, then we send them an email to let them know that that's happened as well. And if the email address is wrong, there's an option for admins to enable to either reject that outright or to have it such that they can reply to another email to say, yes, this really was from me. So the handlers themselves don't need to do any of that. That's all included in the API. And of course, that email address includes the user ID. And then if all of that all matches, we take the email and the attachments and we pass it to that process message function which I showed before. So that process message function takes two pieces of information, both standard classes. You get the record and the message data. So the record just contains some fairly basic information. The email address, that's that long address that was emailed. The mailbox, which is in the example I just gave, I think it was ARN testing. The handler ID, which you should already have, and the user ID and the data value. And those are the bits which you'll probably want the most. To make things easier, it also loads up the user, and it also puts that data record from the database, which has the validity and the ID, all those kinds of things. We also put that in there. So you probably want just the user ID, the data value, and the user. And when this is actually run, before it's run, we call the cron set user. So we actually, when this process message function is run, it is actually being run as the user who is receiving the who sent the message. So again, everything should be fairly easy for developers to handle there. On the message data side of things, we've got the message ID, which is an IMAP message ID. So a lot of these things are very IMAP specific. We've also got the subject, which some people want to use, the timestamp from the message. So, for example, in the case of forum emails, we put the timestamp that the message was sent as the time modified on that email. We also have the hoard envelope data, and you can have a look at how that works separately. There's a whole hoard API with documentation if you want to get any additional information out of there, and that includes things like BCC and CC addresses, or sorry, not BCC, obviously, CC and sender and from and all that kind of stuff. We've also got the plain text headers, which just is literally the headers that you'd see if you view the headers in your mail client. And then you've got the message body in both plain and HTML, and any attachments. And attachments come in two forms. You've got ones which actually have been attached to the message, and for a lot of mail clients you can attach things in line, and then you have to look at how you process those for your individual items. And you can see an example of how all of that is used in Mod Forum's reply handler, including both attachments and inline attachments, and putting those back into the body. And if you look at the private files handler, we also use both of those, but in a slightly different way. So here's again a small example. You can see we're taking the drink. When somebody created the drink, we created a drink record, but it doesn't know any information. We're taking that subject, and that's just another way of getting the subject. We're cleaning that up, setting it as that should have been title for the drink, the name of the drink, and then we're getting the ingredients from the body of the email, and then any pictures of the email, the pictures of the drink are also being attached to the message. And if you return, you have to return a Boolean value from this function. If you return a false value, then we let the user know that something went wrong, but it wasn't. We don't know what went wrong. And if everything was fine, you can return truthfully. And there's also an option in the API to specify a success email. And if you do so, then the user will be sent a successful notification, which they can then control in their current messaging API, their current message configuration, so they can choose whether they receive those or not. And that's all part of the standard message system. And they can also, if they want to, choose to receive those by other formats like private message or using the Moodle mobile app if that's configured. So some other feature suggestions. One of them would be some things I came up with were to be able to reply to the new account email confirmation, so that we don't have to go into the email client and click a link and everything. That may not be something that people want, because that may make it easier for bots to use, but we can make it as an option which admins can choose to enable or disable. One of the ones that Damien suggested, as he's the author of the assignment module, was being able to reply to a reminder that your assignment is due with the assignment so that you can submit it. I haven't had a chance to implement the private message reply. And another one which I thought would be quite interesting as a bit of gamification would be a text-based MUD. So if anyone's played Muddits and Go West and all that, you could potentially implement that using the inbound message API. So I think that's all I have at the moment. So if there's any questions.
I have one, maybe. Are there any special requirements for the server to use it? You know, I'm thinking about various free hosting services and these things.
You need to. No, actually, I don't think there are. The PHP IMAP functionality isn't very good, so we haven't used that. We've used the Horde library, which is an open source GPL3 library.
Yep.
I think it's GPL3. It's open source and compatible with our license, and that uses sockets, which I'm fairly sure are part of standard PHP, and don't need anything else. Cool. So on the Moodle server, you shouldn't need anything. The only thing that you might need is the ability to connect to your IMAP server.
Right.
So if your host is particularly difficult, then it might have balance IP rules or something, firewall rules, stop you from doing that. So that's the only other thing that I can think of that would stop you. The only other thing is that we only support IMAP because POP3 is a bit flaky and doesn't handle multiple connections as well. And we expect the IMAP account that people are using to be a dedicated account just for this purpose. So it's not intended to be used someone's personal account, because the mail pickup tool goes through and reads every single email and flags them as it processes them and moves them to different folders, and has its management and deletes things which don't match after a period of time.
Cool, thanks, Andrew. I'm just checking whether there are some other questions in
Yeah, so I can see Rex has asked a question about attachments. So yes, attachments work, both inline and actual mail attachments. The expiration date is used to invalidate the address. So you can make an address available, and as an example, using the ability to reply to the new account creation email, if you have a guest access where you can users can create their own accounts, we could send them an email to say reply to this email, and we could expire that email within 30 minutes or something. And if they try and reply to it after that time, they'll get a message to say they can't do that anymore. Damien suggested the assignment submissions I mentioned. You could potentially, Baz Brands asks about email-based student support ticket system. Yes, you could do that as, I guess, a module or block or local plugin. You could use that, yes. And yes, it's Horde. Were there any other questions that you've seen on Twitter or anywhere?
Nothing I spot on Twitter, so I guess we can move on to the next point.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, John.
Thanks.
I'm pretty sure you will soon have a inbox full of questions and reports on how useful this inbound API is. We actually had this feature already implemented in Moodle once as a part of some Mnet stuff or something like that. It was possible, but I think this is much more robust and better implemented solution, definitely.
Yeah, the original thing we had was something called Verp, and it's just the same idea, but Verp, we were only using that to handle email bounces, and the rest of it I don't think was ever fully implemented. But it's something we could also do with this implementation to disable messaging for users if their address keeps bouncing.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. And now let me put the spotlight to Marina Glency. Hello, Marina. We would like to hear something about the new process that was implemented for 2.8 about string deprecation. So if you can start, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So string deprecation, this will be a really short announcement. So starting from 2.8, we have ability to deprecate strings that we are a little bit afraid of removing. For example, suspect that some third-party plugins may use it, or we missed some usage in the code. But because we're afraid to remove the strings, we haven't done it for a while. And at the moment, I think David was saying that we have like hundreds of gray-listed strings in Amos at the moment. What was the number, David?
2,000 to 3,000, something like that.
Yeah, so imagine the extra work for translators in every language, because they don't really know which strings are used and which strings are not. So if all the developers gradually start deprecating the strings or even removing them, that'll be great eventually. So deprecating strings means just moving them to another location, announcing the string name in the deprecated.txt file. One thing that I wanted to say here for developers, well, first of all, if somebody is using deprecated string, the message will appear just as well as if somebody is using deprecated function. So it has debug developer level, so it won't affect the production sides on the development. And if you discover that you're using deprecated string, you need to look at git blame, because there is no way to display the message why the string was deprecated. So you just find, yeah, thank you. I don't know who's scrolling, but thanks for showing this part of the screen. So you just try git blame on the deprecated text file in the core or in the plugin, and you see who deprecated it and when. And if developers try to make commits very clear with the deprecating strings, it will help. Well, we only deprecated about 10 strings or maybe 15 in 2.8. So there is no other big changes. But as far as I understand, Amos will at some point show the strings as deprecated on normal strings, and also a string customization screen. We'll need to update it at some moment and notify people if they shouldn't customize the string because it's deprecated anyway.
Okay, thank you, Maria.
That's all from me. Yeah, thank you.
Yep, I think the idea is pretty simple. The same thing why we deprecate some functions without actually removing them for a while. We realize that we need to do same thing with strings because we can never be sure that the string is probably used by other third-party components or something like that. I would also like to add that there will be a follow-up process on this one when we will integrate this information about deprecated strings into Amos, our Moodle translation tool, which will replace the current gray list functionality. So information should be getting synced soon. Okay, then that was about this. If there are any questions. I don't think so. Okay, so I think we can pass the microphone to Demian to talk us about a short information about recent assignment table restructure that happened. When?
Hi everyone. So this won't take very long. I just wanted to show you. I did some work on the assignment module recently, and the reason that I wanted to talk about it here is that it was a fairly major change to the assignment database tables, and I know there's a lot of plugins and things like that which do direct queries against the assignment tables, and in a lot of the issues that I've been seeing, they've been doing it wrong, and part of the reason for that is because it's quite complex to work out. If we have a look at...
Yeah, that's what's being shared at the moment. See, you need to find the tab.
So if we have a look at the kind of things that I've been seeing, that's how someone might imagine that you would get a student submission record from the assigned submissions table, but it's wrong. Assignments can have multiple attempts, so that will give you all the attempts for an assignment. Some of them might be draft, some of them might be reopened, and really the most common use case is when people want the latest assignment attempt. And to do that, prior to 2.8, you had to do this big nasty monster join in order to work out which one was the latest attempt, because there was only an attempt number field in the submission table, which would a new attempt. So in order to work out the max attempt, you'd have to join on itself and work out group by max attempt, and then put in all the join conditions and make sure it works in all the databases, and it was very difficult. So I added a latest column to the assigned submission table, which is always updated whenever a new submission is created or an old submission is changed. So it's a slight denormalization of the table, but it gives you much simpler queries. If all you're after is the latest assignment submission, that's all you have to do now. The other thing is that there's a new assignment submission status called new, which happens, for example, if a student looks at the assignment submission page but doesn't add a submission, then that will actually create a submission record, but the status will be new. And the purpose of that submission record is just so that we can have a record in the table that latest equals 1, but if you're after the latest submission attempt, you want to ignore these. So those two things together is the equivalent of that big monster join that we had before. If you're trying to get the latest grade record for an assignment, the grade will always, the attempt number will always match the attempt number from the submission table now. So if there is a grade, there's now always guaranteed to be a submission with a matching attempt number. So you can use the same query that I showed before to get the latest submission and then just join on the assignment grade table. And that should make far less bugs and run much faster because it's not doing that complicated join every time. Okay, that's all I wanted to talk about. Back to David.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Sorry, go on. Sorry, it was actually me in the feedback in Moodle part office. So it was Damon. There are additional information about this change in agenda, links to upgrade the ext file that provides more information about this. Okay, let's move on to mobile app development news and roadmap. I would like to ask Juan Leiva to introduce us with some news. Juan?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay.
Well, go on.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
We can hear you, Juan. You're breaking up a bit.
You sound good from here.
Did you see my? Okay.
No, we can't.
So well.
No, we can. Yep.
There is an echo. Can you? Okay, so I'm going to talk about Moodle Mobile. First, about the current status of the application. Version 1.7 was released a week ago. This new version has an interesting feature, like is for reading forum discussions and posts online or offline. This is the first version that use web workers that are like background processes. Well, not really, but like background processes in JavaScript. So you can download messages, posts, and information in the application, and you don't see any effect in the user interface. So it's look like native application. And well, you see that web workers requires Android 4.4 or iOS 7. The application detects automatically if the application, if your mobile device support this feature. So some users using the application in all devices, like an Android 4.2 device, will not see the same options that a user using a modern Android version. Okay, this is one of the problems we have with the mobile browser fragmentation. You know that Android changed the browser in Android 4.4, and everything broke in the application, and also there were some problems in rendering the page with styles and so on. Okay, so another interesting point is that all the web services required by the application are integrated in Moodle 2.8. So you'll need the local mobile plugin if you install Moodle 2.8 because you have all the web services the app needs, the app needs. So this is the short-term roadmap. You can see that we are focusing in notifications because we are going to release, well, not release. We are going to upgrade the iNotifier, the push server, to a new version that supports Windows notification, also support plugins for custom messages. This is quite interesting because we are going to send from Moodle the complete message object in JSON format to iNotifier, and then we will have a custom code, a plugin in iNotifier in Python that will modify format the message depending on the target device. That means that we can manipulate the message to look different in iOS or in Android or in Windows. This is needed because, as you may know, iOS payload message format is limited to, I remember, was 256 characters. So you have to sort the message for iOS, but in Android you don't have that limitations. So you can deliver improved notifications for Android. We are going to also improve the layout of notifications in the application. So we are going to be able to control background and foreground notifications. So because it's different when you receive a notification when you are in foreground, you are using the application, and when you are in background. It's different for Android and iOS, and it's different also in the way we display the notification. You know, if the device is in foreground, we are showing a pop-up message displaying the notification, and if it is in background, you receive the typical Android or iOS notification in the top bar. So we are going to be able to control where are you coming from, background or for foreground, and we're going to be able to display the message in a correct place. So if you receive a notification and you are in foreground, you will see an option for moving to foreground directly. We are going to allow also the user to delete and discard notifications from the listing and change different options. In a long-term roadmap, we are going to allow to upload any type of file to your Moodle private area using the application. Using the intents in Android, you know that you can share a file in Android with another application. So if you share a file with the Moodle application, that means that you are going to upload that file to your Moodle private file area. We are going to allow to view assignments uploads, and we are going to allow the teacher to grade that assignments uploads. So we are going to allow to the teacher to load the file and view the file in the mobile device and then grade. Sorry, but I'm receiving notifications. Yeah, the quack. Okay, so talking about desktop, we are thinking in use Node WebKit. That is a software that allows to create a desktop application based on an HTML5 application. So this is quite experimental, but it works really good. And also we are planning to make a survey asking the community which features they think the application must have. You can see there the link. This it's coming soon is a work in progress. So if you can wait for a couple of days, it will be officially published. Well, how can you help me? So for backend developers, core Moodle developers, so if you create new features or developments, you can create web service for exposing the new APIs. Also, you can create APIs suitable to be called from external functions. That the main problem that I have when I creating web services is that there are not too much core APIs that are suitable for be called from an external function, because parameters doesn't match with what we expect in a web service, and different problems. For contrib developers, you can share your code or ideas, and please avoid implementing features that are in the roadmap, because I knew about a guy that was creating also forum support in the application at the same time that I was doing it. So it's the same. And for anyone listening, you can also translate the application using Amos. lang.moodle.org. This is the component name, local Moodle mobile app, and you can translate it, the application, for any language. Development. Well, this is the Moodle mobile simulator that you can use for developing. You can use Chrome or Chromium for development, and it's very good because you can spend your 80% of your time developing in the browser. You don't need to touch very much in a real device, because the simulator has options for simulating push notifications and intents, and you can browse the file system, and it's pretty cool. And you have there the documentation for developers I think that is update, so you can contribute. Okay, I want to talk about community suggestion, that is to switch to unit framework. We are currently using backbone _ jQuery, require.js, and some jQuery plugins in the application. Since a year ago or less time, I think, there is this framework called Ionic that is very popular, and it has amazing applications, hybrid applications. I'm going to show you a couple of samples. So this is an application done with Ionic. You see that it seems native. It looks very good. And this is another example of an application created with Ionic. There are HTML5 applications, but they look so polished, so good. So I'm reading a lot about sorry, I'm reading a lot about Ionic because it will help us to fix a lot of problems. You see there are a tracker in the issue, a tracker issue in the document, and this is a list of advantages or things that can help us using Ionic. That you see, Ionic have perfect touch gestures, events, components, support CSP, infinite scroll, pull down refresh, unit testing, LTR support. Well, it's very amazing, that framework. And that's all.
Can I say something as a follow-up to that? This whole approach with the app and what's going on with the web services there, if you can imagine this Angular JavaScript framework, it could replace Moodle's interface at some point in the future if we had enough web services. And if we could separate the interface from the back end, and all devices work through web services all the time, it could be quite an interesting world. So something to think about. In fact, the very, very first versions of Moodle, I always thought, oh, this web interface is just a placeholder. It would be Flash eventually. This was a long time ago, but same concept. And you know, I don't know. I think the mobile app and the stuff Juan's doing is really cool. So thanks, Juan. I just wanted to throw that in. Sorry, David.
I would just like to add that there was a question in the chat about the reason for the local mobile plugin. Is just acting as a filler for missing web services, as the app already needs them, while Moodle core doesn't or hasn't doesn't have it implemented or integrated yet. So that's why the local mobile plugin is needed to act as a bridge between these incompatibilities of Moodle and the application. And there was also a call for anybody who is using the mobile app as a basement for their own development. We would really like to know your feedback and sharing the code and ideas and everything. Okay, thank you very much, Juan. Just let me check if there is something at other channels yet. Okay, looking good. So thanks again to Juan and his Duck for a nice presentation about the mobile application. Let's move on in agenda to another point, which is a short introduction of new features and sort of a roadmap for the plugins directory, which is a central repository or database for our plugins in Moodle. There are some news that happened recently since the last big meetings. We have we have introduced a new initiative called Featured Plugins. Can you see the screen actually? Yeah, I can see now. Featured plugins, which is basically a very simple idea. Every month we pick one interesting plugin and we give it a spotlight in our blog forum. We focus on plugins that are somewhat interesting in particular area. It doesn't need to be the most downloaded or most popular or something like that. We pick plugins that are interesting in some aspect or something that we would like to highlight. So we started in July and we featured 3 plugins so far. Check our Moodle plugins traffic forum for reviews and these things. The other thing is a new concept that is coming soon called Plugin Guardians, which is a code name. Not sure about the final terminology yet. The idea is that as plugins are submitted into the plugins directory, they need some initial approval review, and we are going to ask community members to provide peer reviews of this plugin. So we are forming a group of people who are helping us with these peer reviews on this plugin. We have some candidates already. We have a group of 3 people or so who are going to start very soon. So we will see how it goes, and this is still very open space. So if you are interested in providing peer feedback and learning about new plugins as they come and providing reviews for them, please contact us and join this new Plugins Guardians initiative. Next thing we are working on currently is better support for releasing new plugin versions more easily, because the whole process of uploading the new zip and everything into the plugins directory is maybe seen quite more big complex. So we would like to make it really simple. New interface basically detects if there is some new tag, Git tag added to your plugin. We support GitHub for now, and it tries to fetch as many information as possible from the GitHub itself, including all these tags and branches and maybe release notes and these things. We will see to what extent we can actually get this, but this is what we are currently working on to make the whole release process by tagging more straightforward. And there are a lot of other things that are on the table that we would like to implement very soon, including community ratings, keeping a list of favorite plugins per user as a new or another indicator for plugin maintainers on how their plugins are actually used and what the feedback is. We would like to see tags or labels to organize plugins in formal ways or alternative ways than just by category. We would like to replace the comments as the inbuilt tool to communicate with plugin maintainer, because we would like to see a lot of we would like to see more tools that basically help us with both plugin validation, checking for common errors, and these things. So we would like to see an external asynchronous tools that check these plugins regularly and inform the maintainer if the plugin is building still okay. Something similar to continuous integration as we know it from Moodle core itself. So it's things to come soon. Let's see how it goes. I would like to say thank you to everybody who is providing plugins. We are reaching to the magic border of 1,024 plugins very soon. So thank you very much, because plugins is what makes the whole Moodle infrastructure very powerful and easy to customize. Okay. Just let me check if there are any questions yet. Yeah, interviews with the plugin authors are really important aspect of the whole idea of featured plugins, because we realize that very often it's actually people and their stories behind the code that is very interesting, that makes it good to share with others. So we focus a lot on actual people and developers and their stories behind the code itself. Okay, let's see how it goes. The best way to keep up with plugin awards currently, it's probably going to plugins traffic forum and subscribe to it, because we publish new posts monthly into that forum, and once we have more than just a couple of them, we will make a list of them quite at the front page of Moodle plugins. We didn't want to put the list of containing 1, 2, 3 plugins for now, so we plan to add it in the future. Yeah, we need more on what is actually used on servers. What is the general response to plugins? Who is happy user of the plugin and stuff. Yeah, Anthony suggests that we could use site registration feature to actually report back to Moodle what plugins they have installed and if they are used and such. And yeah, we'll definitely consider this with a possibility to opt out. Okay, thank you very much for your questions and comments. Let's see how it goes. Next on the agenda is the future of IMNET, and I was hoping to have somebody from Catalyst to report us more details on this ambitious project. But because this is terrible timing for New Zealanders, we didn't get anybody to join us. So maybe may I ask Martin to just say a few words about the recent meeting about IMNET, and to just give people an overview of what's going on.
Yeah, actually, can you throw up the link, seeing as you're there anyway? So I didn't prepare anything, but we had a meeting in New Zealand recently. Piers Harding, and now I'm going to get in trouble because I can't remember everybody's name who was there, but the main people in charge of Mahara. Obviously, MNet is mostly for inter-Moodle Mahara connections, and from Moodle to Moodle or Moodle to Mahara. So if we change it, we all have to move together. And this summarizes the meeting, so check out this page if you're interested. The key thing that we decided is that both products would contain simple SAML PHP as a library maintained in core, and that would simplify lots of the rest. There's too much detail. We're also, one thing in Moodle particularly that would interest you is that we're talking that it's quite essential to separate the authentication from Moodle user, so that you'd have multiple authentication services once and you all link to the same user account. So that frees up, you could log in via a single sign-on on another site or via Google or whatever, and still get into your same user account. We had a plan in the air, as we discussed it, that all sounded like it was going to work. So next step would be to flesh this out more fully and decide who's going to work on what bits.
It's great to see that there is actually demand for this feature, and the basic idea is basically to break MNet down into separate functionality units, like make it distinct authentication from web services, from communication, and these things. And it's good to see that there is a consensus on how this should work in the future. So let's see that things will finally move on in this era. Thanks a lot, Martin, for this.
Exactly.
And let me check. It's time for some crazy ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Tim Hunt.
Hello. We have green dots. So I suppose that means you can hear me. So I may have just lost my right.
We can hear you well.
Good. So this really comes from the Open University wants students to be able to type during their exams, and they've decided they want to do this using Moodle and the client-server system rather than just having everything running locally on the student's laptop. And as a result of this, if there is anyone in the world who knows how you make Wi-Fi really, really reliable, then please talk to me after this meeting or offline sometime, because I'd really like to know. Because it turns out if you sit students with their own laptop in a hired room for 3 hours, about 10% of them will lose their internet connection at some point. So, as part of dealing with this problem, what we'd like is for the Moodle quiz to work reliably, even if you temporarily lose your internet connection. And when I thought of this, it seemed, well, this might also be quite nice if you were doing a Moodle quiz on a train and you went through a tunnel or something. You know, you might be quite nice if If this worked, great. Thank you, David. You pulled up the bug. I did a sort of brain dump in there, because clearly when the OU's exam department came to me and said, make it so the quiz still works even when the student loses Wi-Fi connection, I thought, you must be mad, this is impossible. And then I thought about it a bit more and realised there might be a way to do it, which I've written in the bug. Basically, web browsers now have this thing called client storage, so you can stuff the data in there even if you can't send it to the server, and it will probably be there later. Obviously this requires a bit more JavaScript to sort of store it, and then when you detect there's an internet connection back, send it to the server. Yep, Andrew's pointed out client storage has issues in browsers, mostly with storing, multiple choice choices or the text someone's typed into Atto. So that's going to take a while to reach 1 megabyte. Efficiency matters. The other thing we'd have to stuff into client storage is the rendered version of all the questions, so you could jump backwards and forwards between different pages of the quiz, even if you've lost the internet connection, but that should work too, I think, just sort of a bit of Ajax. Finally, there's the nightmare scenario where the student just can't get back online at all, and you have all their exam answers stuck on their laptop, and you need to get them back. So Sam Marshall told me how to do that. Actually, you get JavaScript to write a data URL, and then when you click on that URL, it downloads a file for you, and then the invigilator or proctor, if you're an American, can copy that file off the student's laptop onto a USB stick. So amazingly, I think this crazy idea may actually be possible. Woohoo! And if anyone has any thoughts, please comment in the bug or the forum thread. And I'm probably going to have to give this a go between now and Christmas, and we'll have to see if it works. On the subject of which browser we use, we actually are mandating a particular browser. We are mandating something called Safe Exam Browser, which locks down your computer when you run it. Right, Damien, oh sorry, that was the other thing I wanted to say. As Damien says, this is certainly at the moment we're not thinking, some Moodle questions will grade your answer immediately the moment you finish typing it. We are not thinking of doing that on the client side. In Moodle quiz terms, we're thinking about what's normally called deferred feedback behavior. So the kind of quiz where you have a whole lot of questions and you're going to type in your answer to all of them, and then at the end you're going to submit the whole thing. Similarly, yes, thank you, Andrew. So it's just about saving the responses and then sending them through later. Good point, Andrew, of what to do about timed quizzes. I wish you hadn't said that, but I suppose I'd much rather think about it now than later. So there we go. I'll stop talking. Any more questions?
Can this be eventually extended to, or the approach that you are thinking about? Could it be eventually extended to other areas of Moodle, not just quiz?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think, yes, it probably could. I think it's going to be difficult enough to do it just thinking about the quiz. So I think it's not ridiculous to, for me to implement something quiz-specific, and then we can all look at what I've done and then do the harder problem of doing something super generic that solves the same problem. And then we can refactor the quiz system to use the new super generic thing. So I think I'll do it in that order.
Okay, it makes sense as a sort of prototype of right. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I don't think there are any questions coming yet, apart from good luck wishes. Please let us inform how it goes. It sounds crazy enough to become true, to be honest. Okay, next on program was Petr Škoda, but he didn't arrive as far as I can see. Check again. No, so I'll ask Petr to share his idea or proposal for cleanup to General Developer Forum at Moodle.org. And that takes us to the last point in the agenda, which is questions from the audience that were put in advance into the docs page. The first one was how's Moodle HQ reacting to the developer community reaction to the new logging and event system. There were a lot of threads opened at Moodle.org that we are aware of, and we are monitoring it, and we are discussing it carefully. Martin already explained some of the reasoning for why this all happened, and just a few, or maybe one point was that we still believe that even if the introducing this new event and login system can sound as overkill for a lot of plugin developers, for example, or additional plugin developers, we still believe that if we have enough events being triggered and tracked, logged, and everything, we can eventually come with really cool tools for reporting and analysis and these things. This is kind of egg or chicken problem. You know, we can't have really good tools to report and do some analysis without data, and we can't have there's no point to have data without these tools. So we started with logging and event system. That sounds pretty big, and we believe that we will come with cool tools for reporting on this yet. Does anybody want to add something to this point?
I think you covered that quite well, David. I just want to add that as well as the logging and analysis of the logs with all that rich data, having events firing means that Moodle plugins can react to each other, and we can have more really interesting things going on in that space. And lastly, Damien, you're saying you could kind of see a way that maybe we could simplify the coding a bit.
Well, some things have been discussed, like in the mod assignment, the fact that you've got like a class for triggering events, which all needs to be agreed on as to whether that's something we want to roll out further. But a lot of places in assignment you can trigger it using one line once the class exists. So if we add more of those classes, where this is like a generic type of event into core, then anyone triggering those kinds of events can do it in a single line. But that needs agreement and discussion.
But yeah, obviously everything can't be one line because you know, if you're sitting down to think about logs, you've got to really think through the data, the context of that log, and it's that work you put in there that helps everything later on. So yeah, that's all I'd add.
Can I actually say something? No.
Sorry, go on.
Well, it's just I completely get what Martin is saying about we want to capture higher quality data, and events are generally a good thing. The thing is, if you really want to encourage that, then the API needs to be expressive and not like something designed by a terrible bureaucrat. You know, if you want an API where people have to give about 6 or 7 bits of information about an event, well, that should say 6 or 7 lines of code. It shouldn't take 50 lines. So, you know, it's just a pity. We want people to do this, so we should have made it as easy as possible for them to do what we want. And I'm afraid the current API failed to do that. And it's not like people didn't try to say this would be the case before it was implemented. So sadly, we are where we are, but I still think it could have been done better.
Yeah, that's basically the point of many forum posts in forums, that the requirements for the developer to actually implement all these classes and everything sounds just too much for simple logging. I don't know if it was discussed if there could be some wrappers around these, so they could maybe generate these classes or events more easily. Let's see. No, I would say we could give this a time for now to see how it goes once we start firing new more quality events. Because, for example, there are already plugins appearing around there that use this events driven development. They're actually subscribe to various events and react on events in Moodle, which appears to be a very clear way how to integrate plugins to plugin communication and in functionality.
Yeah, I think just responding to Tim, I think you're right that it's not ideal, but like I was saying before about feedback, we hopefully will do a bit, we'll improve it over time. I'm also interested in what Eric was saying there about how the log table gets big and you're worried about it. That's the kind of thing we need to be thinking about as well. How it's working in actual installations now.
Okay, let's continue with the discussion in the forum. Maybe somebody comes with some solutions and ideas how could make it less sucky for contrib developers. There was another big topic opened recently about followed up an Yahoo announcement of UI framework being stopped developed for and there was quite a big thread at Moodle.org about this. There is, as far as I know, I checked just today, that there is no action agreed yet. We really think that it's not definitely necessary to decide something right now under pressure. It's pretty sure that UI would work or would continue working for a while yet. But it's good to gather all the proposals and discussions in Moodle forums. Various people come with various ideas, and yeah, some of them look quite promising. Somebody would like to share their ideas on JavaScript thing, on future of JavaScript in Moodle. Yeah, again, let's see how it goes. My personal feelings is there is no need to make any definitive decision yet, so we have a bit of time yet. The last thing was related to Moodle 3, which I was actually going to say that there is nothing special about Moodle 3 because given our date-driven development model, it's just natural successor of Moodle 2.9. But Martin mentioned something at the beginning that Moodle 3 might be sort of special. So maybe Martin would like to elaborate more on this.
That was just a teaser to make you ask that sort of question, in fact.
Okay, I thought so.
No, I think apart from usability and those sorts of things which are important, the main things that I'm focused on are the competencies and the planning of learning plans. So that stuff. But we'll see. We're still working on the roadmap there. Sorry, we missed the UI thing here. Did you want to say something, Damien, about UI?
Well, yeah, just echoing what David said. When we saw the UI thing come up, we did discuss it here, and we discussed it in the forum. And the immediate response is that we don't have to rush and throw all of our UI code away and then immediately jump onto something else. And if we did that, it would be kind of silly. spent a lot of time building all these nice tools and libraries in UE and all of that processes. And so we don't want to take a huge backward step, which has no sort of visual benefit for teachers, and rush into something new. Yeah, so I think that we all need to discuss that a lot more before we reach a decision.
There was also one thing that we hit while talking about it, was that particularly Moodle rendering subsystem, as it is designed right now, it actually expects, or right now it relies on PHP being executed on server side, and currently we don't have any nice way to render content in JavaScript only, to still give our rendering mechanism a way to, or a theme, a way to change it as well. So I think that all these Moodle specific issues and or demands would be very important to be taken into account whatever approach we are going to choose.
Yeah, which is
maybe
with
the
element library work that we were doing. We got it to a certain point, but the thing that we hadn't looked at all was the JavaScript side of it. So if a JavaScript needs to render a menu, that menu should basically come from the same, look the same as a menu that was generated by PHP, and the theme should be able to override that in one place, and everything needs to work together. And that's there's a big hole that we haven't solved yet. And if we're going to move to something that's not UE, we should tie all of that together. So we built a really good new framework for linking all these different things together.
Yep. Sorry, Andrew, I saw your avatar moving. Was there something you would like to?
I was just going to echo what Damien was saying, but he beat me to it, which is basically that I think we need to just work out what we need first, and there's no need to rush into anything. Although the YUI library is no longer being actively worked on in the same way it was before, Yahoo are still using it and will periodically do the occasional release, but not the same cycle that they have been till now.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, we have, sorry, let me check the debrief. Okay, I don't see any particular question related to these. Okay, let me close this up then. Talk now and. Okay, so thank you very much everybody for joining us, be it now or later when watching the record. It was very useful to hear everybody's talks here, and let's wish the new Moodle 2.8 release not that much regressions and bugs, and I believe it will be awesome release that will make a lot of people to move from LTS release to this most recent version. Thank you, and say goodbye to all the world around, to everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Great job.
Okay, see you guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, and bye.